Well, 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 you've come to find out what's the best hand splitting tool available on the market today. Well, grab yourself a cold drink, have a seat, and let's discuss. So based on the title of the video, if you clicked on this, I'm assuming you want to know more about axes, mauls, and some of the different options out there and what one might be best for you. But first, why don't you grab a seat, grab a cold drink, and get comfortable. In fact, let me grab my cold drink. That's going to be 32 ounces of ice cold water. Let me know in the comments below, but it's been brutally hot this year and very humid. I probably picked about the worst possible year to start my own business again doing contracting, because it's not easy doing this in your 40s, going outside every day. It's 85, 90, 95 degrees. The sun's scorching you. It's just not an easy way to make a living. But on to the topic at hand. What is the best firewood splitting tool to take care of your needs? Well, the answer to that is simply going to be, that's going to be a mechanical splitter of some sort, much better than the axe. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I'm just kidding. But all kidding aside, I do believe a mechanical splitter is going to be much more efficient and faster than any axe or maul is going to be, especially if you have limited time, or as you get older, maybe you're not as physically fit or capable as you once were as a younger person. I actually have a whole host of videos on Superspliut, which is a kinetic flywheel type splitter. It's the original flywheel splitter, and I have a lot of videos on Superspliut. I actually did a tour of the facility here in Massachusetts with the owner, Paul McCann. They make a great product. It's an American company, but really any gas-powered, splitter or electric-powered is going to be probably your best option. But if you're bound and determined to have a hand splitter, we've gone through quite a few different models and types of splitters on the channel, so let's discuss them in detail right now, and we'll go over the positives and negatives of each one. So the first firewood tool we're going to talk about is this absolute behemoth. This is a Sotz Mega Monster Maul. This is a 24-pound maul. That's about a 20-pound head, and then somewhere around a 4-pound pipe handle. This thing is an absolute brute, and it brutalizes firewood. But it's very heavy, and it's going to be hard to swing all day long. So I certainly wouldn't recommend it as my number one choice. So his baby brother, which is the original Sotz Monster Maul, same idea but a smaller scale. This is a 16-pound maul. That's a 12-pound head, 4-pound pipe handle. And this thing really also does quite a number on firewood rounds. You've seen me use this in quite a few videos, and this thing absolutely is a monster, hence the name Monster Maul. But again, it's still quite heavy. 16 pounds is certainly lighter than 24, but still going to be a task and a big ask to swing this thing all day, busting through firewood rounds. So I would probably limit this to maybe splitting your bigger rounds in half or even quarters, and then tackling the rest of the pieces of something a little bit lighter. So another cool axe that you've probably maybe never seen before is one that I've showcased on the channel, and that's going to be the Chopper 1 axe. This is actually a specialty axe. It has a spring-loaded head, which basically has these wings that as you hit the wood, they pop apart. I split quite a bit of wood with this in my men's mental health video. I'll try to link all the videos I'm going to mention in the description of this video. So if you want to see a video on a specific axe or maul in more detail, please check out the description. But this is a really fun axe, but a lot of people think this is a gimmick. They think it's just kind of a, one-off. It's not really going to work. But I can tell you what, if I had to pick this or the Sotz Monster Mauls, I think I would choose this Chopper 1. It's pretty heavy duty. I believe, if I remember correctly, the head is pretty beefy, and it weighs somewhere around, you can see just how thick that head is compared to like your standard Fiskars X25, X27 type axe, which we're going to go over in just a minute. But I want to say this Chopper 1 axe head weighs like 5 or 6 pounds, so it's heavier than a lot of axes, and it's just under some of your mauls. But this thing does work well. This one has a fiberglass handle. They also had these Chopper 1s with wood handles. There were other brands that had kind of similar, spring-loaded heads, like the Great Divider So there's at least 2 or 3 brands I've seen that were kind of similar to the chopper one. But these are definitely a unique axe. But due to the price that you're probably going to have to pay to get one of these today in 2025, it's not what I would recommend. Whew, like I said in the beginning of the video, it's been brutally hot this year. It's got to be 90 degrees out today. And I'm sweating just sitting here talking to you about axes. So summertime certainly isn't the time of year that I would personally choose to process my firewood. I've always liked to do it in the fall or even early winter. Spring can be okay, but it can be really wet and muddy some years. And obviously the summer is just too brutally hot, and then you got all the mosquitoes and the humidity. Just not my cup of tea for splitting wood. Let's move on to something else a little unique. This is actually a fireman's axe, or some people will call it a Pulaski axe. It has a sharp point, and that's for digging into doors. So if you had a rescue situation, you had to break a door down and get people out of a burning building, that's what you would use. But you could use this to split firewood. It might give you, again, it's kind of a fun factor versus your regular axe. You might get a good conversation going with someone else based on just the shape of the axe. These are fun, but I would not recommend this either for your primary wood splitting tool. And of course, if you talk about fun, unique axes, we're going to talk about something like a brush axe. These are pretty cool, but ultimately, these really aren't meant for splitting wood. I think you'd probably damage this tool trying to split wood with it. These are really meant for brush, bamboo, things like that, where you want to clear areas and get rid of that kind of overgrowth. But they are a fun tool and well worth checking out. So at the small end of the spectrum, you're going to have these little hatchets. These come in a number of different brands, handle length, head shapes. But ultimately, these are really lightweight tools. They're great for splitting kindling and maybe, teaching a younger kid how to split firewood and be safe. But ultimately, they're not really big enough or heavy enough or long enough handle to be a serious contender for your #1 firewood splitter. So stepping up the game just a tad bit is going to be this Fireside friend. This is from Estwing. I really like this tool. This is probably one of my favorite firewood splitting tools that I have. This thing weighs quite a bit more than your hatchet due to that heavy, wide head. So you get a lot of power in your swings. Because of that wider head, it tends to push the wood apart better than a hatchet. And like I said, because of the weight, you can get a lot more power with your swing, but you can still swing it at a pretty respectable speed because it has a shorter handle compared to a lot of your axes and mauls are going to have. But I would definitely recommend getting one of these, not necessarily to be your main firewood splitter, but just to have on hand. Keep it by your wood pile to turn your wood into smaller wood, make kindling. These are a really, really nice tool, and a nice option is the Estwing Fireside friend. But this isn't going to be ultimately a top splitter either. I'm telling you guys, this heat and humidity is just ridiculous. But let's keep on moving on down the line. Not for you, sir. So another hand splitting tool that you may or may not have seen is going to be these manually operated slide wood splitters. Basically, take this little piece out. So basically, you put this on the round, pick your piece up, hit it down like a hammer. You keep doing that, and eventually it does split the wood apart. I have videos where I compare this to regular traditional splitting mauls and axes. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I would not recommend this for most people. I think it does have a place in the market, maybe for people that can't swing a traditional axe or maul. Maybe they have shoulder mobility issues, or maybe they're elderly and they just can't swing an axe or swing a maul. I do think these are a safer option than most of your axes and mauls are going to be, and they're probably easier for certain people, like I said, with maybe mobility issues. But I couldn't recommend this to most people as their primary splitting tool. So I've talked about some of the more specialty axes and mauls that I have in my collection. Let's start getting into some of the ones that are more common and that I would recommend for your splitting needs. And the first one is going to be just your standard wood-handled, 6 to 8 pound maul. This one happens to have a purple head and it has a purple handle, or at least the guide part. I actually made this in honor of my mother, who passed away from cancer several years ago, and I've talked about it in other videos. And I've showcased this maul on videos splitting wood. And I'll tell you what, this thing does a real number to firewood. You can swing this a whole lot faster than a heavier tool like some of the Sotz that I've shown. And it's just a really good tool. I would say the biggest negative to a wood-handled tool is just that if you overstrike or you miss your round, you can do damage. You can break the handle, somewhat easily. But for the price they get for these simple tools, I think they're really hard to beat. And this would be one of my top choices for a firewood splitting tool. If you're going to do it by hand, is going to be a wood-handled 6 to 8 pound splitting maul. So another one that I would definitely recommend would be a Fiskars splitting axe. This is an X25, which has a shorter, I believe, 28-inch handle. The very popular X27 has a longer handle. I believe it's 36 inches, and those are probably one of, if not the most popular splitting tool on the market today for hand splitting tools. And they make a great product. I have a number of Fiskars products, and they do work well. The biggest thing I would say, though, with an axe is going to be, because of the narrow shaped head, it tends to get stuck in the round a little easier than something with a wider head like a maul or even the Sotz. But due to the light weight of this tool, you can split this much longer for longer periods and not get nearly as tired as you're going to with some of the other tools. But let's get into my number one firewood splitting tool that I own, that I recommend you get for yourself. All right, I think we've covered just about every type of splitting tool that there is in the market, other than maybe something like a big machete, which, by the way, I do have videos of those too. Such as the Fiskars, the cold steel all-terrain chopper. Machetes are great, they're fun, but they're really not good for firewood chores. Man, it's having unquenchable thirst today. But that's going to lead us into our number one tool, and that has got to be, in my opinion at least, the Fiskars Isocore Maul. The thing I like about this maul is the same as I like about pretty much every maul. It's a good balance of weight, speed, handle length. Has a longer handle than something like my Fiskars X25. Has a heavier, wider head than something like a Fiskars X27. And in my opinion, this is the all-around best choice for splitting firewood. It has a isocore handle, which basically is, supposed to reduce the amount of vibrations that this tool is going to put into your arm. You swing something like the 16-pound Sotz, it's all steel, and swing this, and this thing feels like a real dream with that isocore handle absorbing the shock. This is a heavy enough tool that you could swing it all day, and it's beefy enough to get through those big rounds, whereas a lot of your axes, you're going to have to do edge splitting and pick it apart from the outside, which works great, but you end up with a lot of these weird, kind of narrow pieces that are wide. But if you want your more traditional firewood shapes, maybe squares or triangles or something like that, I think it's easier to accomplish with center splitting, which you're going to need a heavier tool in my opinion. That's where something like this Fiskars Isocore Maul shines. It's about an 8-pound tool, perfect balance of weight and speed and everything you could ask for in a hand splitter. So if you have questions about any of these tools that I've shown in today's video, I do have videos on most of them in depth for each tool. And like I said, if you want to check out the description of this video, I'm going to link a bunch of those different videos. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you next time.